always good. Alright, my name is Jessica King and this is my senior project. Alright. One December night, a mother and a daughter were driving home from a relative's house. It was around Christmas and the roads were very icy and very cold. They had been driving for a couple hours when suddenly they hit a patch of ice and swerved off the road. The mother, in a frantic, trying to get control of the car, decided to turn the steering wheel, which made them flip the car as they slid off the road. The daughter wasn't buckled up, and when the car flipped, she was thrown out the window onto the road. And the mother, which did have her seatbelt on, was still in the car when the car was upside down. When she finally regained consciousness, she went outside to look at her daughter on the road. She found that the daughter was not breathing or moving. She didn't know what to do. The first thing she decided to do was call the ambulance. But other than that, she didn't know what to do. She sat by her daughter crying as she waited for the ambulance to show. When the ambulance finally came on the scene, she had been pronounced dead. They tried to revive her, but there was no luck. This is one of the reasons that I chose my project. Preparation. Being prepared for emergencies that can happen in life, such as what happened in this story. College and medical field. I have always been interested in the medical field, and I would love to pursue a degree in nursing and then go on to pediatrics. Experience. And getting experience in high school to prepare myself for these kind of situations is super important to me. I feel that just being able to get into a college, you need experience and to get into the nursing program. And knowledge. I feel like there's always something new that I can learn, and it's exciting for me to know how to bring a person back to life again and how to assist them when they need it. So for my senior project, I decided to take a CPR certification class and first aid. And for my first class, there were two different classes. The first class was 5 hours for one day. And the first thing that we learned was how it works, how CPR works. So when someone goes into cardiac arrest, their heart stops beating, and it can go into, it stops pumping the blood enough to make it to the rest of their body. So it can go into something called macular fibrillation. And it's when their heart has an irregular heartbeat, and that's where the compressions come in. And compressions are manually pumping the heart enough to get the blood to all of the organs and able to keep them alive. And breaths make it so oxygen gets to the blood, and then which is circulated throughout the body, so all of your organs have oxygen and blood. So after we learned how it works and why we do the things that we do, we start the chain of survival. Yeah, so these are just pictures of how it works. So when you manually pump the heart, it's just manually pumping it. But when you do the breaths, you need to make sure that the neck is tilted up, So the airway is open, and so the breath gets to the lungs, and then oxygen can circulate through the lungs. All right, so the chain of survival. The chain of survival is a series of events that need to occur to ensure the best chance of survival for the victim. And the very first thing that you do is you make sure the scene is safe. Because you can't help someone if you're going to get hurt in the process. So you need to make sure the scene is safe. Then once you go and you examine the person, you need to tap them to see if there's a response. When there's no response, then you recognize that there isn't a response and that they could be in serious trouble. And you would start by calling EMS, which is emergency services, and or emergency medical services, and immediate CPR, which would be followed by rapid defibrillations. And CPR would be 30 compressions to every 2 breaths. And you would do that for 6 cycles until you get tired. And if you get tired, you would then take a break, because there is no use helping someone if you're tired and you can't do it properly. So, after immediate CPR, you would try to get rapid defibrillation. And that's when somebody brings an AED, and that is an automatic external defibrillator. And the defibrillator, when the heart, it has that irregular heartbeat and it's going crazy, the defibrillator shocks it so it can go back to a normal heartbeat. And that is one of the most important things in the chain of survival, getting them that rapid defibrillation. Because without that, their heart will not be able to return to a normal heartbeat. And so then, when EMS arrives, they will bring a rapid defibrillator unless you have a rapid defibrillator somewhere at your work or somewhere near where you are. And then the very end of the chain is followed by advanced life support and hospital care. So so the chain does not end until the patient has made it to the hospital and has been put on life support and gets the care that they need. Okay, so doing compressions on an adult. This is one of the first activities that we did for our class. Everybody in the class got a mannequin, and we would all make sure that our arms were locked and that we had one hand over the other, and then we would start by doing 2-inch deep compressions. And the reason that we do 2-inch deep compressions is because you need to make them deep enough to break the ribs, because if you don't break the ribs, then you won't be able to pump the heart manually. Okay, so the second thing that we did was learning rescue breaths and regular breaths. So the breaths, you need to make sure the chest rises, and then rescue breaths is when they have a heartbeat, and you do not do compressions if someone has a heartbeat. So you would just do breaths because they still need to get oxygen to their lungs and everything else. So then we learned so these are called one-way valves. And if you don't have these, then you would just do mouth to mouth. But since mouth to mouth you can get it's just a hygiene thing. If you don't have these, you can do mouth to mouth, but it's really great if you do have them. All right, so we learned how to use an AED, and the very first thing that we learned was to turn it on. And it's very simple, but the AED, once you turn it on, it will walk you step by step how to use it, where to place the pads, and when to shock the person if needed. Alright, so the second class was first aid training. And just like with the CPR class, there's a chain of survival. You need to make sure the scene is safe. You need to, if it's a child, you need to look for the object in which they injured themselves. So if a child were at the bottom of a staircase injured, you would then assume that the child either slipped on something and fell down the staircase, or just fell down the staircase in general. And so you would then have to watch yourself. In order to protect yourself, you would have to watch yourself going down the stairs. And so then we learned the Heimlich maneuver on infants and adults, and the maneuver for infants and adults is very different. With adults, you would have to find their belly button, go up, put your hand over your fist, and then thrust up to get anything that is in the airway up, so up and out of there. And with infants, you would have to put them on your arm. You would have to do 5 reps on their back, then flip them over and do 5 compressions. And then if the infant then is not crying, if you pat them on the back, which they probably should, if they then are not crying, then you would have to put them down and you would start CPR. And every time you go to do breaths, you would make sure to look for something that is obstructing their airway. And if you can get it out, never do a blind swipe at something, because you could obstruct the object deeper into their throat. All right, so stopping bleeding with gauze, pads, and pressure, and an ACE wrap. So this is one of the activities that we did in our class. And basically, you just take the gauze wrap it around, make sure there's pressure to stop the bleeding, and it's pretty straightforward. There's a technique to do it, but if it's really all you have, then you'll be able to figure it out. Just wrap it around and make sure it's tight. So, learning how to use a tourniquet was also for more of the serious bleeding injuries. If someone has an open wound that is bleeding out, then sometimes you would have to use a tourniquet. And that's when the bleeding doesn't stop with just pressure, so you would have to put the tourniquet above where the bleeding is so you can stop the bleeding. Alright, so my paper topic. So for my paper, I chose to do the benefits of CPR. And so I started out with saying how tragedy can strike. So how tragedy can strike, how the classes are accessible and fun, and they're just easy for anyone to learn, and CPR also increases survival, and that's one of the reasons why people should learn. Okay, so these are just some facts to help people understand how important it is to be prepared. And so tragedy can strike at any moment, really. And 88% of cardiac arrest victims happen in the home, and 70% of Americans don't know how to react. And one of the things that I really wanted to reach in my paper was just stressing the importance of how the biggest accidents will happen, they can happen in your home, and you should be prepared. Alright, so classes are accessible and fun. They are college community courses. That's one of the things that I did, where they're just courses that are open to the community and anybody can do it. There are online courses and anyone can sign up. The classes are taught for any type of learning style, and the survival increases 3 times when somebody uses CPR. So it's just very important. It's a very important skill to learn. All right. So in conclusion, after all the things that I learned doing my CPR class, my conclusion was just being prepared for life's unexpected twists and turns, and becoming CPR certified and first aid certified is one of the best ways that you can do that. Thank you.